Okay, so while I'm doing this, I think I can get started. Thank you so much for your patience. And today we're actually starting a bit earlier than the original schedule. Well, life happens. And for those of you who will not be able to watch us live, of course, we always have the replay or the recording. It's always available in our group and in the various channels, in our Facebook page and YouTube once the recording or the replay is available later on. Okay, so yeah, we're ready to get started. And today we're going to talk about the sales pipeline. So you've seen our promos about this one. And that's something that we're going to unpack in today's discussion. There's a sales pipeline is just a simple way of, knowing where every opportunity stands because when business gets busy, your leads can end up everywhere and things happen. There's no clear way to track what happens next. You know what happens. Follow-up gets inconsistent, you miss good opportunities, and then sometimes you feel like you're working hard without having a clear you feel like you're working hard, but then you still don't have a clear view of what's actually moving forward. Okay, so we'll break this down in a practical way in today's discussion, and you are already seeing our guest for today, Stephen. Yeah, I'm so excited to have Stephen again in today's conversation. For those who have been watching our Community Connect, you already know probably Steven, but still allow me to give an overview of our guest, who Steven here is. And he has actually spent more than 2 decades working in sales and marketing, helping businesses grow by improving how they connect with customers and, of course, turn interest into real results. He has worked with a wide variety of businesses from local B2C companies to large B2B manufacturers. And right now, Steven is currently working in marketing and sales with Lojo Marketing, and he focuses in inbound marketing strategies that help businesses attract the right customers and build systems that generate consistent growth. So thank you once again, Steven, for gracing our Community Connect. And for our audience, regardless if you're watching us live or catching the replay, feel free to join the conversation by writing comments, asking questions in any comment section of the platform. All right, so let's jump in. Sales
Sound
pipeline. When people hear about sales pipeline, some of them might probably think that's too complicated or that's just kind of like a corporate thing. So, Stephen, let's get started with what does that actually mean, or what is a sales pipeline?
so sales pipeline is pretty simple in nature. It's really taking somebody from a stranger and what it takes in order to make them into a customer or a client. And so it's that process to do that. So yeah, I'm sure we've all heard of like an oil pipeline. And let's just say, for example,
Mm-hmm.
in if you're a refinery, an oil refinery, you're going to have different methods of getting oil to your refinery. Some may come via a direct pipeline. So that's pipes that get pumped into the factory itself. Others may come by rail car. Some may come by boat. You know, there's different methods of getting that oil to your refinery. And so that's what it's in reference to of a pipeline is that channel or that mode in which the product service process goes in order to reach the final result. So that's what we're going to be looking at here today is in your business, how does it go from somebody who's just a potentially interested customer or referral, maybe it's a current customer that's an upsell opportunity, that sort of thing, and how do they get tracked until they become a final customer.
Okay. To our viewers, start thinking about, and you can also comment this, answer this question. Where do your leads usually come in right now? Are they coming from phone calls, website, forms, or maybe more than one? Facebook messages, referrals, emails, somewhere else. Okay, so where do your leads usually come from? All right, share your answers in the comments, and we'll see. Maybe you're more focused in social media right now, and so on. Okay. So with that, Stephen, where do most businesses break down when it comes to managing leads?
Okay. So once again, that's what a pipeline solves, is it helps manage those leads. But most businesses, I mean, they may be going about their business and then all of a sudden they get a phone call and it's somebody that's
Mm,
potentially
yeah.
interested. So that may end up going on a sticky note. It may end up going into a voice memo. It could go into, like text themselves. As far as that goes, that's where a lot of people's leads live when they first come in. Or it may just be in your memory. You're like, oh, I got to call that person back and got to look back at that call log and be able to get back to them. So that's where, whenever we're relying upon anything other than a system, that's when it can break down. So, but that's where most people in small businesses at least start. As far as when a lead comes in, they're just mainly writing it down.
Mm-hmm. Are you that type of business owner to our audience? Do you have a system in place? If not, that's something that you really have to think about. Okay. So, um, let's look at, do you have an example for us? Breaking down a simple, how can that pipeline look like for a business owner?
Yeah, yeah, and I'll share my screen here and give you some examples. All right. And first, I should clarify. So, when we're talking about pipelines, you had mentioned, like, hey, let us know where your leads are coming in from. You can
Mm-hmm.
create pipelines based on where the leads come from, as far as like if it came from Facebook, if it came from Google Ads, if it came from a referral. But that's not the recommendation. The recommendation is the process from which they go from a stranger to a customer. If that process is different, that would necessitate a different pipeline. Okay. So, for
Okay.
example, you have a pipeline like this, like a customer that's an upsell opportunity. That may have a different process, such as identifying the opportunity, recommending what that, you know, solution is to their problem, creating the proposal, following up, that sort of thing. And that's different than maybe it's a large project or it's a quotation thing where you have a new lead that comes in,
Mm-hmm.
have to go through a discovery call, then you go through and review the needs with them. You create a custom proposal. Maybe there's an on-site visit or something like that that needs to take place. That's a different process than somebody who's currently a customer. So that would be a good place in order to have separate pipelines. And you can have as many pipelines as necessary and with
Yeah.
whatever stages are in there. But just to give you the example of a normal pipeline, let's go to, which one do I like? I don't know. We'll go
Maybe a
with
generic one?
general services pipeline.
Hmm.
All right.
Okay.
So the general services pipeline, it should be something along the lines of the new lead comes in or they've been identified somehow. And then you've reached out, you've contacted them with whatever the next step is. And whether that's an appointment, generally you want to have some sort of interaction with that potential lead in a manner where you're finding out, are they a good fit? Is this something that we can provide? That sort of thing. Then you create an estimate, a
Mm.
proposal, something. Then it goes to follow up after that. And then it's, either won or lost or that sort of thing. And then you could have other stages in here, such as recycled, where I use that term for those that they may be still interested, but they haven't definitely said no, but they're still out there. And you can have them in the recycled area and you can put them back to a different stage in the pipeline at a different time. The one thing you want to do is make sure that it's a little bit simplified. If you have too many steps, then
Okay.
it becomes a cumbersome and it's a little bit hard to track. So to change pipeline stages, you would just simply go in, find your general services pipeline, edit that, and then you can drag and drop these stages to different ones. You can change what the names are, add in a new stage if desired, that sort of thing, and create it custom to what it is that you have. Okay. So that's what a
Okay.
general would look like.
Thank you for clarifying and kind of like giving more context, especially when I asked about where leads are coming from. So let's back up a bit, and I guess the starting point perhaps for this one as we talk about sales pipeline is the customer journey. So it should be the time now to think about what is your customer's journey. How does that look like from being a lead to being a customer, right? So what are those stages that they have to go through? Are you the type of business that people have to book an appointment with you? Because you have to consider that in the pipeline stage, So what are the contact points? So now I guess that's what in a practical aspect, if you haven't thought about your customer journey, now is the time to take some time, take 30 to 30 minutes to probably an hour, and really think about what are the stages of your customer's journey, so that from there you can draft or create the pipeline stages accordingly.
Yeah, and just a
Steven.
note to, yeah, a note to
Sure.
that. What we want to do is create milestones. You can do
Mm,
pipelines in two different ways. You can either do it in activities, like, okay, so I had a phone call and they didn't answer, and it's like, okay, what is the next step? Rescheduling or trying to reach out again and follow up. And then what is that next milestone? So you can have like
yeah.
activities and milestones, or you can just have milestones, which is like how I had set up that just simple general leads pipeline, is those are milestones that you want to keep track of. Are they new in the process and just becoming a lead, or is it something where there's something that needs to be done or has been done and now it's waiting for that next milestone, so that you can keep track of where they're at. And a lot of that comes down to preference of how you want to track and monitor your sales pipeline.
Okay. So speaking of monitoring, keeping track of sales pipeline, so how does this help, or why does having that set up a clear pipeline, how does that, or why does that reduce the stress for business owners?
So, as I mentioned before, when you're writing stuff down or you're just trying to keep track of, oh, this is who called, oh, you know what, I got to get back to that. I got to get back to Tim because he called in and, he needs an estimate and I got to do that tomorrow. Instead of keeping track of all that mentally, or instead of keeping track of all that on paper or even in a spreadsheet, having a clear pipeline gives you visibility on this is where everything is at. So you stop relying upon that memory. You create clarity for not just yourself, but also for your team. So if you're working with others, then anybody can get in there and see, oh, this is where we're at. This is what we have coming down the pipe. As far as maybe there's an influx of new leads that have gone really well, and your production side of your business, they need to be aware of that, of, oh man, I got vacations coming up, you know. And so how we're going to resolve that. And so you can see what's happening in your business. And that's where it reduces stress. So instead of it just being an immediate need of this is what's going on in the sales channel, it's like, now I know. And now I can see this
Mhm.
is where everything's at.
Yeah, and we know business owners are already juggling a lot of things. So this one is something that can at least be taken off your plate, the stress and all this mental load. All right. So to our audience, as we go deeper, I'd love for you everyone to think about this. Okay. So if you looked at every open lead in your business today, would you know exactly who needs a response, who needs a follow up, or who is ready for the next step? So, is that something that you have started thinking about? If not, then think about this, okay? So, because that's what this conversation is really about. Stephen talked about getting that visibility. So, you're not relying on memory, on scatter notes, or even last minute scrambling. Okay. So moving forward, probably those who are not techie, they get intimidated by CRMs, sales systems. So now that you started discussing about sales pipeline, does this need to be complicated?
Yeah, and as I mentioned, it should be pretty simple. We should be able to simplify it down. And the biggest thing here is you want to use it. So I know that sounds
Yeah.
goofy, but you want to use it. You want to be able to have something that's manageable. So if you just have like four stages in your pipeline where it's here's a lead, here I've done my, sales pitch and now I'm following up and it's either closed and that's your simple pipeline. If that's what you can manage and maintain, then that's where you start. And then as you have the need for more visibility of, well, maybe people are in a little bit different nuanced stage, then I should add that in. But start wherever it is that you're going to be able to manage and maintain it and understand it at a glance. If it's something where somebody creates that pipeline for you and you're like, now where does that person go again? I mean, that's not a good thing. You want to be able to have it, oh, yeah, it's obvious. This person, this is where, that potential client is at, and this is the stage that they should be in. If it's a little bit too complicated, then that's not that's not your friend. So.
I think that's one of the biggest takeaways what you said, Stephen. If the you want your pipeline to be something that you can use. So if there's one thing that you can take away from the conversation, yes, set up a pipeline, but make it something that you want to use. All right. So let's talk about common mistakes. What are some common mistakes that businesses make when they try to organize their sales?
Yeah, the biggest things is they have too many stages, as well as not just that, there's an ownership responsibility. So if you have a specific person that's dedicated to sales, they need to be the one that knows and understands that. Or whoever it is, there needs to be ownership that's involved there. And that's one of the biggest mistakes that we've seen is when people set up a pipeline, it's like, okay, now that's done. And nobody really knows, oh, well, it's my responsibility in order to make sure I'm moving these things from this stage to this stage, or I'm the one that's supposed to be following up and checking on where things are at. So there needs to be that clear responsibility as well as follow up and making sure that, yeah, those leads and they're getting touched.
Okay. So they're probably thinking about, all right, now I understand what a sales pipeline is. I understand that that's something that is important for my business. So to those people who are watching, listening, and they want to improve their sales process, where should they start?
Yeah, and you actually mentioned the first step a little bit ago is think about that. Think about what is that process from going from a stranger to a customer and what are those stages? So being able to identify the stages and define what each stage means, meaning what needs to be done in that stage. And then basically having it in a CRM or in a software where you can track and keep track of what is the next action and that sort of thing. And then the last one is the practical step is you just got to review it. You got to review it and
Mhm.
put it on your calendar or schedule something on a regular basis to be able to get in there and review the sales pipeline. Like on my calendar, and I have a sales pipeline review every day. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to see, all right, that's where this person's at. That's where this one's and this one and this one. And I'm going to know what the next step is that needs to take place or has take place or is scheduled to take place with what's coming up.
Okay. Thank you for those things. And we in our team, we're big believers in systems. We want to set up systems so that because that's an efficient way of running a business. Okay, so in relation to sales pipeline, what's a tool or a system that you would recommend, or you would say that this is something that can help simplify the process for business owners?
So we utilize Growth Genie 360, and that's what I shared before. I'm going to share my screen again and just
Okay.
show you some of the practical things that you can do within here. All right. Share screen. All right. So I'm going to go to the customer upsell pipeline and just talk about how something like this can work or could work for your business. Okay. So first of all, yeah, I gotta get this to a place where it's a little bit workable. All right. So you have the ability to easily move stages. So if somebody's an opportunity and now it's going into the recommendation needs to be made, you can easily just drag and drop it and put it over there. As I mentioned, you want to be able to see what the next steps are. And so in a good sales pipeline, you're going to be able to have identification tools that let you know that this is what needs to be done or this is what's scheduled to be done. So in this case, if we have somebody that has an appointment that's set up with them, let's let's just go into Sherry's here real quick, see if I can do this. I'm going to add a meeting. Yeah, we got to pick a time slot. Sure. Let's go with that. All right. So if we book that in here within the contact information, I can go to actions. I can see that, oh, there's a opportunity for that individual, and then it will take me over to the opportunity card itself. Okay. Let me go back over into opportunities so we can see Sherry's opportunity, but you'll see here that there was an appointment that popped up down here. So that's letting me know on May 21st at 8:30 a.m. I have an appointment with Sherry. And so that's a valuable thing when you're doing your pipeline review to be able to go in and say, all right, do they have an appointment? Does every single one of these people have an appointment for what the next step is? If that's what you're supposed to be doing, or you have add a task. If I add a task in here for Sherry, then task, and let's say that that's on the 28th. I'm going to assign it. Okay. We're now going to assign that task. And now, in just a second here, we should see a check mark pop up for, or a little one, because that says that I have one task that's waiting for for me to do for Sherry. So this is something else where you can just go through and visually check and say, all right, that's what I need to take, or that's what needs to take place. And then there's other things called smart tags. And I won't get too much into this, but you can have tags that pop up that let you know, all right, this is a hot lead, or this is a high value lead, or this is something, and it can be based on logic of what has been entered in regards to the lead. So in this case, you go into pipelines, we're going to go into the customer upsell pipeline, we're going to edit that, and then We're going to see smart tags, and we have in here one that's a orange tag that shows up as hot lead, and this is going to be based off of the this drop down. So you can put whatever information on that opportunity that you want, and then you can have that based on something. So this is just a test drop down that we put in there, has second option, that when second option is highlighted, it's going to come up as a hot lead. Now that may not make a bunch of sense as far as what to do there, but let's just say that it's somebody that says, "Hey, I'm on an intake call with a lead and I have a custom field in my opportunities. And when I'm talking to that lead, they're like, yeah, you know what? I need to be done before the end of the year. I need to have this project completed." And so then I'm going to put in there before the end of the year or something like that. And I can have a tag that automatically pops up and basically gives me that information and clarity of this is right where that person needs to be. So it says hot lead, in this case, new lead, that sort of thing. You can customize this information to show up to 8 different values as far as what the value of the lead is, where they're at in the process, who the contact owners are, that sort of thing. So, once again, this is just trying to give you a real life example of how you can manipulate the information on your pipeline to give you better clarity, visibility of this is where people are at and this is what needs to be done. So between looking at this, going to your task list, and going down that, you should have a daily schedule as a salesperson in order to say, all right, I know where everybody's at in the pipeline, and they are all progressing and they're all moving forward in order to become a client or a customer, or potentially, maybe they're not interested. So, yeah, that's how you can do it. And then obviously we have different trainings that are available and other things if there's interest in how to how to make that happen.
Okay. And I think one more thing that can be added into that is the automation aspect of it, that you don't have to always do the manual process because this is Growth Journey 360. It is AI powered. It has workflows as well as a feature. So you can create workflows, automation to, well, automate the process of moving two stages depending on the parameters that you have set up. So that's another like great value of having this as your pipeline.
And that's a
Yeah,
whole nother
I know.
together, because there's so much that you can automate, so much that you can do. There are recommended processes and how to make that happen. Like for example, I always recommend you start off manually. Just get accustomed to this is what the process is, and then you go back in and you start automating and making it so that, oh, well, I can take out that manual process, but at least I know how it's supposed to work. And then I'll use the power of the tool to automate it and do the things for me so I just don't have to think about it.
Okay. There's no harm in starting with manual and then utilize the power of automation. Okay, so
Yep.
in this conversation, we talked about sales pipeline, and I hope that you understand now in simple and practical aspect what is a sales pipeline and why you actually should utilize sales pipeline in your business. And we've learned from the discussion that it doesn't need to be complicated. A simple sales pipeline is already great. And make sure to set up something that you and your team, if you have a team member or other sales team, would be using, because otherwise there's no sense in setting up a pipeline that nobody will use anyway. And Stephen also covered some of those common mistakes that you should avoid. And if you are interested in learning more about the tool, looking at an actual demo, how can this work in your business, I'm going to be linking our demo um booking page. Yeah, or some of the resources that you can take a look at. And so you have any final words, Stephen, as we wrap up this discussion?
No, the only final word is just get started and get started small, simple, and easy, but just do it. And it's going to take a huge burden off of your plate. Is once you have that system in place to keep track of leads, then there's no question about where the business is going, as well as you can start learning a lot of things of where is the business coming from and what are some things that you can do to improve it. When you have a solid pipeline in place and you're tracking how things are going, then you don't necessarily need to get more leads because you can refine your process to where your closure ratio increases. And you can do things where you put in different check points or other things like that that are going to cause your business to make more money without adding any additional effort. And it's just by starting with tracking it and seeing this is how it's all operating today. And then you can refine that process. And that's huge to say, now I don't have to go out and spend more money to make more money. It's like I just got to make sure that I'm refining the process that I already have. So.
That's a great place to wrap up today's conversation. And for the rest of you who are currently watching us and those who will be just watching the replay of this session, we encourage you to drop questions in the comments. And don't worry, even if the session is already over, our team will be responding to those questions. And yeah, so sales pipeline, we have learned that it doesn't need to be complicated. And the important thing is it should help you see where every lead stands, the where they are in the sales process or in the customer journey. I think that's the word I'm looking for. And then what needs to happen next to that lead and who is responsible for moving it forward. Stephen talked about ownership in the process as well. So thank you so much, Stephen, for all your insights and talking about the sales pipeline. And also thank you to those who have joined us in our quick community connect discussion today. And yeah, we'll see you again in our next session. That's all for today. Hope you guys have a great day. Bye.